I'll have what she's having.
Hi, it's Brian. Welcome to the Awards Contender, and it's time for the top 10 most egregious acting Oscar snubs of the 1980s. Are you ready? Let's start with number 10, Madeline Kahn, Clue.
I hated her so much. Flames on the side of my face.
Comedic performances don't get enough love from the Academy. Like, it's kind of sad. Every decade we'll get like maybe one or two really awesome comedic acting nominations. I always go back to Melissa McCarthy getting in for Bridesmaids. That was an inspired acting Oscar nomination we rarely see, especially these days. In the 1980s, there are very few Oscar nominations for comedic performances. The big one, I would say, is Kevin Kline for A Fish Called Wanda from 1988. He won Best Supporting Actor, which was really cool. Another bonkers great comedic performance from the 1980s I do think deserved an Oscar nomination is Madeline Kahn as Mrs. White in 1985's Clue. She is hilarious in this movie. I have seen Clue probably 50 times, maybe more, and pretty much every line reading, every gesture of Madeline Kahn in this movie is brilliant, like so inspired. I know everybody goes to the flames on my face scene, but I love the part where she's just talking about her ex-husbands, about why they died, why they weren't really for her. It's a big ensemble, everybody gets their moments, and everybody is great. But there's just something about Madeline Kahn in this movie I go crazy for every time I watch it. And I know it's a movie based on a board game that was kind of a flop at its time. It didn't get great reviews, so it makes sense why this movie did not get into the Oscars. But the Academy had recognized Madeline Kahn twice before, including for her comedic performance in the slapstick comedy Blazing Saddles. Like, she got an Oscar nomination for Blazing Saddles. She could have been nominated for Clue as well. In the Best Supporting Actress category at the Oscars that year, I would take out Amy Madigan for Twice in a Lifetime and replace her with Madeline Kahn in Clue. Number 9, Ossie Davis, Do the Right Thing.
I had to knock him down, keep us both from getting hit. Matter of fact, I saved 2 lives today. His and mine.
So I don't know about you, but I think it's ridiculous that Do the Right Thing only got 2 Oscar nominations, Best Original Screenplay for Spike Lee and Best Supporting Actor for Danny Aiello. Do the Right Thing was easily one of the 5 best films of 1989. It should have gotten into Best Picture, Best Director. It should have been competitive in those 2 categories. For it to miss there was troubling, but what kind of pisses me off the most is that one actor from the movie gets into the Oscars in supporting actor, and it's a white person. That's always felt kind of weird to me. Danny Aiello gives a very good performance in that film. He's very memorable, but there's also Samuel L. Jackson and Frankie Faison and Spike Lee and Bill Nunn. The list goes on, but I think 2 of the most moving performances in Do the Right Thing are by Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee. They have such great chemistry, such rich characterization. They get lots to do in the narrative, and especially Ossie Davis, I think, gives a fantastic performance in this movie. He never got an Oscar nomination in his long career. Ruby Dee was nominated much later for American Gangster. I feel like his grounded, affecting performance in Do the Right Thing was worthy of an Oscar nomination. And so in Best Supporting Actor that year, I would either replace Aiello with Davis or keep Aiello and replace Dan Aykroyd for Driving Miss Daisy with Ossie Davis in Do the Right Thing. Number 8, Meg Ryan, When Harry Met Sally.
We just broke up.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's too bad.
Yeah. Well, you know. Yeah.
So I'm not sure if I've ever mentioned this on the channel before, but When Harry Met Sally is my favorite romantic comedy of all time. I frickin' adore this movie with my whole heart. Rob Reiner directing, Nora Ephron writing, and Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan in the 2 lead roles. Talk about chemistry. My God, they have so much chemistry in this from one scene to the next over the course of 12 years in this narrative where they are mostly just friends, but come on, they clearly have this amazing emotional connection. I have always loved Meg Ryan. I think she is an underrated actress in both comedy and drama. Like, she can bring it, as she has proven in multiple films throughout the years. But her best role and performance will always be Sally Albright in When Harry Met Sally. She fits this role like a glove. She is so funny and creative. Every choice she makes as an actor in this movie is a great one. And she's just so frickin' charming. Just charming to the nth degree. She got a Golden Globe nomination. She didn't get the Oscar nomination. It makes sense, right? Especially in lead actor and lead actress, it's very difficult to get an Oscar nomination for a comedy. I mean, unless your name is Diane Keaton. Like, Diane Keaton can win an Academy Award in Best Actress for Annie Hall. She can be nominated for Something's Gotta Give. Like, Diane Keaton has done it twice, but for the most part, it's very hard to get into Best Actress for a comedy, and sadly, Meg Ryan has never received an Oscar nomination. She deserved the one for When Harry Met Sally. Now, I love Jessica Lange, but I feel like if there's one Oscar nomination of hers that could go, it is Music Box from 1989. So in Best Actress at the Oscars that year, I would take out Jessica Lange for Music Box and replace her with Meg Ryan in When Harry Met Sally. Number 7, Alan Rickman, Die Hard.
Check on all the others. Don't use the radio. See if he's lying about Marco and find out if anyone else is missing.
Speaking of great actors who never got an Oscar nomination, the great Alan Rickman was so bonkers fantastic in a variety of movies lasting from the 1980s all the way to the 2010s. His performance as Severus Snape in the Harry Potter films were incredible, especially that last movie. He's amazing in Galaxy Quest and Sense and Sensibility and Truly Madly Deeply and Robin Hood Prince of Thieves, the latter of which won him the Best Supporting Actor prize at BAFTA, but he never got an Oscar nomination, and it's kind of insane. I feel like that should have happened for something, and I know Die Hard is a summer action blockbuster. Those kind of movies almost never get acting Oscar nominations. Like, if they did, Jamie Lee Curtis would have gotten an Oscar nomination for her incredible performance in True Lies. I think easily one of the best villain performances in action movie blockbuster history is Alan Rickman as the deliciously evil Hans Gruber. He has such a presence in that film. His voice, the way he carries himself, his interactions with Bruce Willis's John McClane. This is not a stock villain character. Alan Rickman treats this project and this character with the utmost seriousness, but also with a wink in his eye too. He's clearly having a blast playing this evil character. Alan Rickman 100% deserved an Oscar nomination in his long and impressive career, and I do think he deserved a nomination for Die Hard. In Best Supporting Actor that year, I would take out Alec Guinness in Little Dorrit and replace him with Alan Rickman in Die Hard. Number 6, Steve Martin, All of Me.
Where are we going? Got to find Crocalasa. I can't go in there. Skylar will think Excuse me, that's a private conversation. Do you mind?
Here is someone else I have loved in the movies my entire life as an actor and as a screenwriter who has never gotten an Oscar nomination, and that's Steve Martin. For the most part, he made a career of comedies, and as I've talked about in this video, it's hard to get into lead actor for a comedy. I think he was worthy in 1987 for 2 performances. Like, he could have been nominated in Best Actor for Planes, Trains, and Automobiles or Roxanne. but in some ways I feel like the closest Steve Martin ever came to a Best Actor Oscar nomination was for 1984's All of Me, where Lily Tomlin's character takes over parts of Steve Martin's character's body, and he has to act like he's not in full control of his movements. This is a very, very funny movie, a brilliant, inspired performance by Steve Martin that actually got some critical attention. He got a Golden Globe nomination, but he also got 2 big critics wins. He won Best Actor of 1984 from the National Society of Film Critics and the New York Film Critics. Like, 2 prominent groups were taking his performance in this movie seriously. And Best Actor at the Oscars that year wasn't overly stacked. It wasn't a year where it's like, well, Steve Martin is very funny in All of Me, but there wasn't room really in the category. There was room for him to get in. So I do feel like this was Academy snobbery against comedy performances that prevented Steve Martin from receiving what would have been a very well-deserved Oscar nomination. In Best Actor that year, I would take out Sam Waterston in The Killing Fields and replace him with Steve Martin in All of Me. Number 5, Susan Sarandon, Bull Durham.
Oh, cute. That's really, just because sometimes you manage to be clever and you have a nice smile does not mean you are not full of shit.
But I'm full of shit.
You're full
I'm
of
full
shit.
of shit.
You are full of shit.
Chastity.
Now here is somebody who has lots of Oscar nominations, right? 5. She finally won in early 1996 for Dead Man Walking. She had a string of mostly excellent Oscar nominations in the early 1990s. My favorite by far being Thelma and Louise. Her first nomination came at the beginning of the 1980s for Atlantic City. She's also fantastic in that, but I do think she deserved one other Oscar nomination that decade for her remarkable comedic performance in Bull Durham. Opposite Kevin Costner and Tim Robbins. She is so mesmerizing in that film. She is fierce. She is strong. She speaks her mind. It's such a 3-dimensional female character. She's not just the girl in this world of men, in this world of sports. Like, she is fully fleshed out, and Susan Sarandon was the perfect casting. She is such a delight in that wonderful movie. It only got 1 Oscar nomination. For screenplay, Ron Shelton. It should have gotten 2. Susan Sarandon was right on the cusp at the end of the 1980s of what would prove to be a remarkable run of performances throughout the 1990s. And I do think that journey began not with Thelma and Louise in 1991, but with Bull Durham in 1988. Again, I feel like some Academy members might have looked at Bull Durham as too comedic, too lightweight to get into an acting category, but I do think Susan Sarandon was that good. Now, Best Actress of 1988 at the Oscars is stacked. This is a tough one to remove one of those 5 names, but if I had to, especially because she's double nominated that night, in Best Actress, I would take out Sigourney Weaver for Gorillas in the Mist and replace her with Susan Sarandon in Bull Durham. Number 4, Danny Glover, The Color Purple.
Who you think you is? You can't cuss nobody. Look at you. You're black, you're poor, you're ugly, you're a woman, you're nothing at all.
Steven Spielberg's The Color Purple from 1985 is a very famous movie in Academy Awards history because it got 11 Oscar nominations and didn't win a single one. I think the only other movie that happened to was 1977's The Turning Point. Usually, if your movie gets 11 Oscar nominations, you're bound to win something. But The Color Purple, no matter how much audiences and critics went nuts for it, no matter how many Oscar nominations it received, that film just could not win anything. And what's even crazier to me is that The Color Purple should have gotten 13 Oscar nominations. It also should have gotten into Best Director for Spielberg, and it should have gotten into Best Actor for Danny Glover. Here is another astonishing actor who's never received an Oscar nomination, and he's done such good work throughout the decades. I feel like his best dramatic performance, the one that should have gotten more awards attention from awards voters in early 1986, was his very powerful and scary, intimidating performance in The Color Purple. That film does not work. Like, it doesn't work at all without the Danny Glover performance. Over the course of those 2+ hours, you really come to despise his guts and root for Whoopi Goldberg Seeley in every way. Glover has so many memorable moments in that movie, but especially at the dinner scene toward the end. The way he treats Seeley like scum, not having a clue the woman she's grown into. I love that Goldberg and Margaret Avery and Oprah Winfrey all got acting Oscar nominations for 1985's The Color Purple, but I do think Danny Glover should have been nominated as well. In Best Actor at the Oscars that year, I would take out Jon Voight in Runaway Train and replace him with Danny Glover in The Color Purple. Number 3, Donald Sutherland, Ordinary People.
It would have been all right if there hadn't been any mess. But you can't handle mess. You need everything neat and easy.
So as of this recording, we just lost the great Donald Sutherland a few weeks ago. He had an incredible film career going back to the 1960s. So many iconic, memorable performances in a variety of films. The Dirty Dozen, MASH, Clute, Don't Look Now, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Backdraft, JFK, Without Limits, Pride and Prejudice, the Hunger Games movies. The list goes on and on, as I've explored in 2 recent videos celebrating his life and career, the Elusive Oscar video about Sutherland, and a list counting down his 10 best film performances. As I talked about in both videos, the closest Donald Sutherland ever came to an Oscar nomination was for his stellar performance in Robert Redford's Ordinary People. That movie did extraordinarily well in the early 1981 award season. At the Oscars, it wins Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, Best Supporting Actor for Timothy Hutton. Mary Tyler Moore is nominated in Best Actress. Donald Sutherland got the Golden Globe Award nomination. And it's like he just barely missed. He was clearly in 6th place. He had to have been the runner-up just because the Academy went nuts for the movie. And Sutherland had had a decade plus of impressive film work. This was a crucial moment. The Academy could have recognized Donald Sutherland for Ordinary People, and they blew it. He is phenomenal in this movie as the father, trying to keep his family together after the death of one of his sons. He gives such a beautiful, nuanced performance in this movie, and it kind of hurts my heart a little bit, especially now that he's gone, that he didn't get that one competitive Oscar nomination for Ordinary People. He would have deserved it. In Best Actor that year, I would take out Jack Lemmon in Tribute and replace him with Donald Sutherland in Ordinary People. Number 2, Jeff Goldblum, The Fly.
You're jealous!
I've become free, I've been released, and you can't stand it. You'll do anything to bring me down.
This truly is one of my favorite performances in the movies that did not get an Oscar nomination. Jeff Goldblum in The Fly is astonishing, is incredible. This is the prime example of an actor in a genre film that deserved to get into the Oscars. I know The Fly is a science fiction horror film. It is very violent at times. It is extremely gruesome at the end. It's not the easiest movie in the world to watch. I'm sure many Academy members were so grossed out by it that really the only category they would consider the movie in was Best Makeup, which it won. But I do think this was a case where we had to look past the genre bias and recognized what Jeff Goldblum was doing in this movie. The way his character of Seth Brundle slowly transforms into this human fly is absolutely brilliant acting through and through. When we can see his face and when we can't see his face by the end. The emotion he conveys under all of those prosthetics and latex, where we can't see Jeff Goldblum really at all anymore, his devastating performance still comes through, and we are sad for him. We mourn him. We know what's coming. There's nothing that can stop it. This movie destroys me every time I watch it. Such a great screenplay. The direction by David Cronenberg is very creative and bold, but also keeps the attention on the human story. It doesn't just become a science fiction gross out movie, like he always makes us care about the characters. That goes for Gina Davis's character. She is wonderful in this. And Jeff Goldblum is on another level. It frustrates me that Goldblum has never gotten an Oscar nomination, and it really, really frustrates me he wasn't nominated for The Fly. Like, once in a while, the Academy can do really cool things. That same year as The Fly, Aliens comes out, and they give Sigourney Weaver an amazing Oscar nomination for Best Actress. How frickin' amazing would it have been the same year that Weaver is nominated for Aliens, Goldblum is also nominated for The Fly. It should have happened. I do think there was room. In Best Actor at the Oscars that year, I would take out William Hurt in Children of a Lesser God and replace him with Jeff Goldblum in The Fly. Now, before I get to my number one choice, a few runners up. Bob Hoskins' Who Framed Roger Rabbit came very close to my top 10 list. What a very difficult task he had in that movie, pretending to be interacting with animated characters, and he does such an amazing job. Henry Thomas' E.T. I know kids aren't nominated at the Oscars very much. It only happens here and there. I do feel like in the 1980s, one child performance that should have been recognized was Thomas in Steven Spielberg's E.T. He is very effective in that. I don't think that movie works without the Thomas performance. Jerry Lewis, the king of comedy. I love Lewis's kind of darker performance in Martin Scorsese's film, The King of Comedy. He showed a different side of himself as a dramatic actor and succeeded in every way. Cher, Mask, in between her Oscar nomination for Silkwood and her Oscar win for Moonstruck, I do think Cher should have gotten a third nomination for 1985's Mask. She is captivating and terrific as the mother in that film. And John Candy, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. This is one of my 10 favorite films of all time, and it's easily John Candy's finest hour as a comedic actor and as a dramatic actor in John Hughes' masterful movie. I do think the amazing John Candy deserved an Oscar nomination. So that takes me to the number one choice. What do I think is the most egregious acting Oscar snub of the 1980s? This is, to me, one of the all-time great performances in the movies. My number one choice is Dennis Hopper, Blue Velvets.
What are you looking at? Nothing.
I mean, talk about an iconic performance. A performance that blows the theater roof off. That blows everybody in the audience back a few feet. Dennis Hopper in David Lynch's 1986 masterpiece, Blue Velvet, is total, mind-blowing perfection. As the terrifying, profane, wildly unpredictable Frank Booth, Hopper pulls no punches from one scene to the next. He is such a force of nature in this movie. I mean, talk about great supporting actor performances. For Blue Velvet, David Lynch got a very well-deserved Best Director Oscar nomination, so the Academy clearly watched the movie. So why the hell was Dennis Hopper not nominated in Best Supporting Actor? Well, the answer is he was nominated, but for a different movie, Hoosiers. That same year, Dennis Hopper also gave a very good performance in the sports film starring Gene Hackman, and so they went with his turn in Hoosiers instead of Blue Velvet, and that was a frickin' mistake. All of these decades later, when people talk about the late, great Dennis Hopper, is Hoosiers the movie they go to first? No, it's Blue Velvet. He is so hypnotic in that movie. when he's not on screen, you're thinking about him, where he might be lurking in the shadows. And I do think in the long history of the Academy Awards, this was one of their biggest mistakes, nominating Hopper for the wrong movie. In Best Supporting Actor at the Oscars that year, I would take out Dennis Hopper in Hoosiers and replace him with himself. Dennis Hopper 150% deserved an Oscar nomination for his chilling, batshit crazy performance as Frank Booth in Blue Velvet. Thanks so much for watching and subscribing, and let me know in the comments below what are your choices for the most egregious acting Oscar snubs of the 1980s, and we'll see you next time at the Awards Contender.